Hey Harvest, thanks so much for joining us today whenever and wherever you're watching. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day. We would love for you to follow us on the socials, harvest.247, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also go to harvest247.org. Check us out online. If you want to partner with us financially, we would be honored. You can go do that online as well. Harvest Church exists so that all people may know Jesus and grow with Him. And we are just winding down our current sermon series, Fruit Inspectors. We have been walking through all the fruits of the Spirit, so you can go check it out on YouTube, all of them that you've missed. We'd love for you to check out those messages. And today, we are talking about gentleness. Now, gentleness is really, really difficult. I've got 3 boys, and our house is insane at certain periods of time. And I have one kid, our middle child, who will really test my patience, right? He'll really test me. And the hard part about it is that he will push and he will prod, and I want to just respond with anger and just slam him, right? Just slam him. And it could be about picking up his clothes. It could be about brushing his teeth. And especially in the morning getting ready for school. All the other both of the other kids are down here. They're eating. I still have a middle child upstairs dancing around, singing, and he's not even half ready. And I am screaming at him up the stairs, "Get down here right now." Now, we all know that's not the best response. But, I mean, what else are you supposed to do when you want to act out, right? When somebody's getting mad, when somebody's making you mad or getting on your nerves or whatever. And we've all had those moments, right? When we want to respond, we know we need to respond in a gentle way, but we respond in a completely different way. We just want to act out, right? It could be with a coworker, our spouse, somebody went over the budget again, somebody broke something in the house, your neighbor has their lawnmower operating early in the morning and woke you up on a Saturday. I mean, whatever. When we want to act out, and we want to respond, somebody out as we're eating and they're making a scene, or somebody cuts us off on the highway. I mean, all of these types of things are things that want to make us act out. And yet, if we're going to follow Jesus, we're called to respond with gentleness, or to be gentle. So what does that even mean? What does gentleness look like? Well, I want to give you 2 Greek words that I think we will use for our definition of gentleness. The first one is prautes. Prautes. It means humility and meekness. Think about soothing medicine, soothing actions, charitable and generous. Think about if you get a burn and you put some sort of aloe lotion on it, how soothing it feels. That is prautes. Prautes is something you expect from your friends, and it is a restorative word. Because when we think about soothing, it can restore a relationship. It can restore a burn or a scrape. It can restore a community. It can restore faith in one another. So that's one word, prautes. The other is apikias. Apikias. It's balance. It's intelligent. It's a good outlook on life. Picture a thoroughbred that has been tamed. Plato called this the cement of society. In a sense, he said it's power under control. It's a thoroughbred that has been broken. So when we talk about gentleness and when we think about gentleness, here's the definition I'm going to use. Gentleness is controlled power that restores. Controlled power that restores. It's power that soothes. Think about tension. Situations will test our gentleness. People will test our gentleness. But gentleness is that controlled power, the ability to control the power to restore the situation or to restore the relationship. When we think about gentleness, one of the greatest pictures of gentleness is, of course, Jesus. When Jesus displayed gentleness, he did so in a way that put gentleness on display for everybody to see. When Jesus put gentleness on display, he didn't do it in the shadows. He didn't do it in the corner. He didn't do it in secret. He did it out for all the people to see, for the community to see. And he brought about gentleness in order to restore people and circumstances. He displayed gentleness so that we would know its purpose and we would know what it looks like. So go to John 8, 1 through 11. It's going to be up on the screen as you're watching. And this is what it says, and we're going to use this story kind of as a springboard into seeing Jesus in gentleness. It says this: Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was brought back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and he taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were at verse 6. They were trying to trap him into saying something that could be used against him. But Jesus stooped down and he wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. And when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. You know what Jesus did there? He did a lot of things. But one of the things he did is he put gentleness on display. He addressed the Pharisees, but he did it in a gentle way. He didn't yell at them. He didn't chastise them. He was gentle with them. He addressed the adulterous woman. How? With gentleness. Jesus saw beyond her accusations and reputation and saw a person who needed to be restored. And he restored her with gentleness, controlled power that restores. Because that's what gentleness does. Gentleness looks beyond accusations. It looks beyond previous known reputations. And it says, here is a person who needs restoration. Restoration back into the family. Restoration back into relationship. Restoration back into a community. Restoration from a scenario. Restoration from something. It says that restoration is more important than the reputation and the accusations. And the way that we can bring restoration is through gentleness, controlled power that restores. I mean, we all know Jesus had the power in that moment to absolutely rip apart the Pharisees, and he had the power and the holiness to rip apart the woman. He didn't. He saw through the scenario, through the accusations, through the reputation. He said, this is someone who needs to be restored, and I have to be gentle, meaning I have to control the power that I have so that I can bring about restoration. It's not the only time Jesus did this. In Luke 19, there's Zacchaeus. He used gentleness to restore him. Jesus didn't yell at Zacchaeus about how bad of a person he was. No, Jesus saw beyond his reputation and used gentleness to bring about Zacchaeus' restoration. In Luke 2, Martha, she was so frustrated. Can you picture Martha? Hand on her hips, tell my sister to help me. And Jesus answers her, Martha, Martha, like a tone of endearment. Jesus saw beyond her frustration, knowing Martha needed to be restored. He displayed gentleness so that we would know its purpose and what it looks like. The Apostle Paul also writes about this as well in Philippians 2, 4 through 5. He says this, don't look out for your own interest, but take the interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. So Paul is saying, in the same way, in the same attitude that Jesus had, we have to display that as well. And that we are people that are expected to display gentleness, using controlled power to bring restoration. Because here's the thing, when we display the gentleness of Jesus, we put gentleness on display. Displaying the gentleness of Jesus puts gentleness on display. And in a world that is ready to rip, ready to destroy, ready to accuse, ready to cast out, when we are able to use gentleness, the controlled power to bring restoration, and we put that on display, man, how powerful of a testimony is that to everybody that is watching. Because we're doing the thing that most people wouldn't do. We're displaying the gentleness of Jesus, and it puts gentleness on display in the same way that Jesus used gentleness all the way back up in John 8 with the woman caught in adultery. The same way he used gentleness with Zacchaeus. The same way that he used gentleness with Martha. He looked beyond reputation. He looked beyond accusations to bring about restoration. And that's what we can do as well. So when we talk about gentleness, why is it important? It's important because when we put the gentleness of Jesus on display, when we display the gentleness of Jesus, we put gentleness on display. And can you imagine if you did that in your relationships? Can you imagine if you displayed gentleness the next time your spouse and you argue? Can you imagine in your relationship with your grown children, if you would just put gentleness on display and use controlled power to bring restoration the next time you disagree? When your coworkers, would they perceive you different? How's your neighbor going to be impacted? How's that broken relationships going to be impacted if you display gentleness? Because here's the thing, when we display the gentleness of Jesus, we put gentleness on display, and the powerful thing about gentleness is its controlled power to bring about restoration. So, who is someone that you can be gentle to this week, this month, this year? So that when you put the gentleness of Jesus on display, they see the controlled power and they experience restoration. We'll see you next time.